Today I'm here to talk about something else that's been quite uncomfortable and I need to get it out of my chest. I'm almost reaching my 30s and perhaps that's one of the reasons why I've been thinking so much about it. But the truth is I feel extremely lonely. When I was a teenager, I used to be fairly social. I was in the nerds group and I really had this belief that if I did everything right, things would work out in the future. In my innocence, I really thought things were as direct as they sounded. Once adulthood comes to life, you realize that this isn't always true. I don't think I'm the only one who's been experiencing this huge loneliness in the times that we're living. I believe this started happening after the end of certain relationships when I really realized how much I needed people. When I was younger, I used to think that I was super rational. I didn't have enough life experience, but I was proud in many senses. I like to say that I used to ponder things and I was very naive, but when I think of that version, I kind of miss it a bit because there was so much she didn't know. And when I grew up, I changed completely. I had the opposite impression. I thought I was overly emotional, and I realized that wasn't even the reality. I had spent a lot of time letting other people's words haunt me. I feel so much, and in that sense I guess I am emotional, but over the course of my life I've learned how to tame it and how to control it. I remember being at college presenting something, and once I finished, a teacher told me that if I was nervous, that it wasn't even noticeable. And I laughed because I had been so nervous that day. My palms were sweating. I had previously been practicing and learning everything I needed to say, practicing the script. And in the middle of the presentation, my heart was pounding. And I was so nervous, trying to make sure my voice wouldn't tremble. And it was funny because I had that same feedback over the course of my life. So I realized I knew how to hide my discomfort pretty well, which made me pay a heavy price in some relationships that were not healthy. I would hide my discomfort pretty well, and not to prove something. I was, I guess, so scared of it that I would hide it from myself. I was a late bloomer to lots of things. And when I was involved in that, there was still so much I didn't know about how to negotiate with another person, about boundaries, their boundaries and my own. It was hard to learn. I did not know what I could and couldn't say. And what made it worse was that the relationship was unsafe. That was it. It was unsafe. It wasn't good. And it taught me to isolate even further. Once I imagined that I had healed enough to expose myself a little more, I realized I couldn't. My alarms were so loud and unfortunately so right that I paid some physical price as well. Dealing with anxiety isn't easy, isn't a walk in the park. When you live with anxiety for long enough, it can get blurry because you don't really know what is anxiety and what is your perception telling you to go. That clouded my judgment because my first instinct was to blame my anxiety for bringing the discomfort, and therefore I thought I should handle it alone. I shouldn't burden someone else. And that vocabulary stayed for so long that I think it shaped how I live. I wish I was interacting with many friends that I don't anymore. I wish I hadn't excluded myself from a lot of life. But at the same time, I know why I did it, and I did it out of protection. I was so wounded that everything was triggering, related and unrelated. And to go out in the world can be very tough. And that is something that humbles us. Once you feel wrecked and you lose your sense of self, your identity, every little task is huge. You don't see the meaning anymore, and you start questioning meaning in places that before you hadn't even questioned. Things were so natural, they used to flow so much better, and I genuinely lost a lot of that. And I know that if I want to build something again, I will have to be very intentional, and I will have to handle some extra discomfort. But the very first time I tried taught me not to do it. It is very brave to keep trying. I don't feel I have enough bravery. I am genuinely tired. I feel exhausted. I do understand I need to give me more time, but so much comes to my mind that it's hard to process. We live in times in which I guess lots of people are feeling alone. I can't be the only one. I'm certainly not the only one. But we learn to hide it, not to feel dramatic. We learn to handle it, to cry when we go to sleep, to eat alone, to wish and brush it off. But there's a limit to what I could run away from, and everything is coming to me at once, and I don't like it. When we start growing up, and when I started growing up, I imagine by a certain amount of time I would have reached a certain amount of things, and my life was truly really different from what I expected, because when I was young I was the golden kid. I used to be a really polite girl, good daughter. I would do everything by the book, and I'm not really sure that that was my identity. I would just do it, and I really thought that the direct consequence of it would be to have a life in which everything would work, and not everything was so linear. I grew to realize that I had become very good at doing things that were technical, that would require my alone time and my own competence, but I didn't pay enough attention to the other side, the emotional side, because when we are teenagers, things might come really easy or not. I am not saying that this is everybody else's experience. I think I had a really privileged teenagehood in which I had a decent amount of friends. I had my identity. I didn't feel left or anything. Even though I did struggle with insecurity, I never felt alone in my teenage days. I had a couple of friends that I could really be honest with, and this is something that I miss in adult years. I miss really genuine connections that are easygoing. I miss going to somewhere that's not special at all and just having the best time. I was not a girl who used to be in parties all the time. In fact, I can't really remember the amount of parties I've been, not because it's been too much, but because I guess I've been to, I don't know, maybe 5 parties in my entire life. And I was quiet. I always wanted closer connections, but I really liked my friends. And once we leave school and most of your friends go to different directions and do different things in life, I experienced a lot of grief because I didn't know how to handle the distance. I didn't know how to handle friendships drifting apart, not because of fights, not because of anything dramatic, just because people were living life and experiencing different things. And once again, loneliness came to me in a very intense way because I felt behind. I felt behind my friends who were in college before I was, who were working before I was, who were in relationships before, and people who in my previous conception had their lives figured out. I do know that it doesn't mean that people have a perfect life, but it did not stop me from comparing myself. that put some more weight in my isolation, because I have this impression that the kind of problems I face, the kind of emotional problems I face, have nowhere to go. But I also don't want to impose, and I don't want to be the friend who always comes with the same complaints, with the same things to fix. And I started feeling like a burden, which is something I realize I've carried for a long time. And living life in some level of isolation these days is hard. Everywhere you look at, people are being encouraged to be social, to travel, to be around, to be posting their happy lives. But when you see your life in a different way, when you realize you're not doing any of these things, and you also don't feel happy in the relationships you have, or that maybe you were broken and you lost people you were really close to, things break a lot. But what started as a choice became something that I realize I miss, but I fear. I don't have the same connections with friends who once were super close, friends who got married and now live life in a much different way. Not better, not worse, but very different. They have different responsibilities. They have reached stages in life that I don't feel I have reached. And reaching my 30s like that is a little embarrassing. I guess most people feel something like this, but sometimes I don't understand what I did wrong. But there was so much effort into being present, into fostering deep things, into showing that I was there, that I honestly thought that I would have that in return. I don't want to sound entitled, but it left a scar that I can't really shake, because I've experienced way too many departures in a short span of time. Some had to do with friends passing away, relationships ending, and I am frankly very confused. I think the older we get and the more we get in touch with grief, the crazier it can get. I can't even articulate, but I don't feel fulfilled at the moment. I do think I need to look at myself with a little bit more mercy, maybe, or gentleness, because if I look at my version 5 years ago and I compare it with today, I think there's a part of me that would be genuinely proud for still being here, for having conquered stuff alone sometimes, but for having remained no matter the pain and what I struggled with. But there's also another part that I think would embarrass my past self, I guess, because I wished I was in a different place. And I can't stress enough that this was not lack of effort, lack of motivation, and lack of experimentation. And I understand that people have different speeds in life. I am not having any twisted fantasies of success, but in many senses I'm not happy with me. And there is this sense of tiredness that I feel when it comes to relationships. I guess I kind of gave up. I realized something these days, that once I experienced a couple of relationships that were shattering, one in particular, that in order to protect myself, I developed something that I craved for. I'm not gonna lie, I really wanted to reach this place, but I don't romanticize it. But I've reached a place in which I made a huge effort to stop thinking that I would exist in people's lives, that the idea of me would would linger. I lost that. The effect that it has is that when somebody is affectionate, or when somebody tells me that they remembered me, I think I dissociate a little. I don't know if I can call it like that. But the part of me in which really felt connection kind of left. I can't rationalize it, but there's been this wall. I built this wall consciously and unconsciously, that made me become very distant, and it's not something I'm proud of. This is the part of my loneliness that is my responsibility. I have been an overthinker for way too long, for origins I don't really like to talk about. I learned how to be hyper-vigilant way too early, and I carried that around. But I have put myself in enough situations that validated my hypervigilance, and in which I felt alone, in which I felt ignored, left like an object. I think what hurts the most is when you know that the origin of your isolation, of your loneliness, comes from pain and comes from memories, not from unrealistic things, but they come from memories of people who once said one thing and then did another. I am terribly dependent on consistency, which hurts me. To me, it's totally okay if you change your mind and if you say, I'm sorry, I don't know, but it's very hard to deal with inconsistencies. That comes from the hypervigilance. I notice it way too early. I don't like to. I try to hide, and then I pay the price of being anxious. And I wanted to belong again. I wanted to be able to have connections that don't want to run away from me. I frankly think I don't communicate things well enough. I don't want to give the impression that I want constant affection and reassurance, because that's not what I want. It comes off like that, like I'm clingy. I fear the name so much that I overcorrect, and I wish I had been more genuine. I wish I had felt safer to express and experiment. Unfortunately, it was not my experience, and the brain learns fast not to put yourself in positions like that again, but there's always a price to pay. I've been paying the price of my experiences, my lack of knowledge, my poorly made decisions, and all I can do is speak, rationalize, and keep insisting. That's what I've been doing. There are days in which I don't want to keep insisting. There are days in which I just want to stop. And I don't really know why I keep insisting, but I like when small things motivate me again, especially because it's rare. It's really hard to see things that used to excite you lose their spark. And it happens so often with so many things that whenever I feel a little bit of that again, it just transports me to a feeling that I think is a mirage, if I could say it like that. It's so fleeting, but I hold on to it. I guess that's what I've been doing with other relationships too. Sometimes I know they'll be fleeting, that it might not be so honest, but I was starving for a connection. I was starving to feel held so much. I ignored my rationality. I ignored my needs at the same time that I was desperately trying to get some needs met. At the same time that I don't really believe that some of my needs are valid. And I want to stop doing that. I want to value myself in a way that doesn't require isolation. But at the moment, it's all I can do. And I'm not proud of it. But I do expect that this is only a part of a process, and that one day I can change my ways. So if you've ever experienced something similar, or if you are open to share your experience, if you felt something, I invite you to comment below so we can have a conversation. I'm always very happy to talk to you and hear your different opinions. Don't forget to subscribe if you think these talks, although uncomfortable, are important. And I see you next time.